Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Eleanor always enjoyed her routine. Every morning, she took the exact same route to her favorite coffee shop, where she savored the same cappuccino with a croissant and strawberry jam. It was a small pleasure that helped her organize her thoughts before facing the fast pace of the day. But that day, something felt different. While Eleanor was focused on her coffee, she heard a stranger's voice coming from the table next to hers. "I couldn't help but notice you always order the same coffee. I like people with clear routines, it shows they're confident in who they are." Eleanor frowned slightly. She looked at the man, who was smiling with an over-the-top confidence, clearly interested in starting a conversation. She gave him a polite smile, with no intention of keeping it going. "Thanks," she said curtly, turning her attention back to her phone, hoping that would be enough to end it. But it wasn't. The man, still persistent, scooted closer. "My name's Colton, by the way. Mind if I ask yours?" She took a deep breath, annoyed by this intrusion. "Sorry, but I'm busy right now. Have a good day." Eleanor left the coffee shop quickly, uncomfortable with how pushy he'd been, but thinking this awkward moment would be nothing more than an isolated encounter. She went on with her day, trying to forget the uneasy situation she'd just experienced. It didn't take long for her to realize that it hadn't ended there. A few days later, while she was working out at the gym after work, she felt that same unpleasant sensation of being watched. When she glanced around discreetly, she noticed Colton there, staring at her while she exercised. Eleanor's heart sped up, and she felt uneasy again. When he saw that she recognized him, Colton came over with a casual smile, pretending to be surprised to find her there. "Looks like we have a lot in common, huh? Maybe it's destiny. Or maybe you're just following my destiny," Eleanor replied, trying to remain calm, even though she was clearly rattled. She ended her workout quickly and left, deciding right then and there that she needed to change her routine to avoid running into him again. She started going to a different coffee shop, switched up her gym schedule, and ate dinner at different restaurants, always staying alert. For a while, her plan seemed to work. Eleanor managed to get some peace back, until the night she agreed to go out to dinner with her best friend, Vivian. When she arrived at the restaurant, she relaxed for a moment, believing she could finally enjoy a pleasant evening. She and Vivian were talking about vacation plans when Eleanor's heart began to race again. Colton had just walked into the restaurant, wearing the same unsettling smile. Vivian noticed her sudden discomfort. "Is everything okay, Eleanor? You look like you've seen a ghost." Eleanor shook her head, trying to hide her nerves. "It's nothing. I just remembered I forgot something at work." But Colton didn't waste any time. Without hesitating, he walked straight over to their table. "Eleanor, what a pleasant coincidence to run into you here, too. It's amazing how our routines keep matching up, isn't it?" Eleanor stared at him coldly, this time determined to confront him openly, not caring who else might hear. "There's nothing coincidental about this. You're following me, and it needs to stop right now." Noticing the attention of other customers, Colton stepped back and raised his hands in a fake gesture of innocence. "Sorry if I bothered you. That wasn't my intention. I just thought maybe we could get to know each other better." Vivian tried to step in, confused by what was going on. "Eleanor, is everything all right here?" "No, it's not. This man has been stalking me for days." Colton's face turned serious, and he slowly backed away, feigning surprise at the accusation. "I think you misunderstood my intentions. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you." He left the restaurant quickly, leaving Eleanor with a racing heart and Vivian full of questions. "Who was that guy, Eleanor?" "Someone who's trying to turn my life into a nightmare." "I have no idea why," Eleanor replied, her voice trembling, holding back tears of frustration. That night, back at home, Eleanor felt a huge weight on her chest. She was sure something was very wrong, but she couldn't understand why Colton had chosen her as a target. The more she thought about it, the more trapped she felt in a situation beyond her control, and fear started taking over her mind. The next day, Eleanor finally decided to tell Garrett everything. But before she could, she noticed her husband was pale, holding a strange envelope. He was standing there, holding it like a silent threat. Garrett opened the envelope without knowing what to expect, but when he saw the photos, a mix of anger, disbelief, and an urgent need to figure out what was happening rose up inside him. Each picture was meticulously selected to tell a convincing lie: Eleanor standing next to Colton in the coffee shop, Eleanor leaving the gym with Colton a few steps behind, Eleanor at the restaurant with Colton not too far away. For anyone who wasn't paying close attention, the photos looked compromising, like they were recording hidden meetings or shared moments. But Garrett knew the truth went beyond what those images suggested. He took a deep breath, trying to contain the rage bubbling up. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were trying to achieve. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding, it was a trap, carefully planned. "This was left in our mailbox," he said, still looking at the pictures with a hard gaze. "Someone wants me to believe something is going on between you two." Eleanor took the envelope with shaky hands, flipping through the photos quickly. With each new picture, her anger grew. "This is ridiculous. They set this up on purpose. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." Garrett crossed his arms, watching her closely. Even though he believed his wife, he needed to understand it all in detail. "I want you to tell me everything, every time you saw this guy, every place he showed up, every word he said. You need to tell me exactly when this started." Eleanor ran a hand over her face, trying to gather her thoughts. "The first time was at the coffee shop a few weeks ago. He just started talking to me out of nowhere, being pushy, sizing me up like he knew me. I ignored him, but then he showed up at the gym. And then at the restaurant. I thought he was just some annoying guy, maybe someone who was too sure he could get whatever he wanted. But now I see he was following me. It was all planned." Garrett slammed his hand on the table, his frustration rising. "And why didn't you tell me before, Eleanor? You should have told me as soon as you realized he was after you." "Because I thought I could handle it," she answered, her voice louder than she intended. "I didn't want to make a bigger deal out of it than it seemed to be. I just wanted him to leave me alone so I could keep living my life." The silence between them was heavy. Garrett rubbed his temple, breathing slowly. He understood why she hadn't said anything, but it didn't change the fact that they were now in the middle of something much bigger. "This guy's not acting alone," he finally said, more firmly. "No one would do all this on their own, with such care, just to hassle you. Someone's paying him." A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. The idea that someone else was behind this made everything even more disturbing. But why? Who would want to do something like this to us? Garrett didn't answer right away. He was staring at the photos, looking for a clue that might reveal who was behind this scheme. He picked up the envelope again, examining it more closely. No return address, no obvious leads. A silent warning. Someone wanted the pictures to speak for themselves. "We'll find out," he said at last. "But from now on, you're not alone in this. If that guy shows up again, you tell me right away. And more than that, we're going to get to the bottom of who's attacking us like this." Eleanor nodded, clutching his hand tightly. The fear was still there, but now there was something stronger: determination. If someone thought they could destroy them with lies, they were making a big mistake. They decided to search for the truth immediately, though they knew it would take patience and cunning. Garrett understood they couldn't just wait for Colton to show up again. They had to act before whoever was behind this made their next move. If someone was willing to go so far to spin a convincing lie, they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. That night, while Eleanor tried to sleep, Garrett sat on the couch, still holding the photos. His mind was racing. He knew this wasn't some random attack. Someone wanted to destroy his marriage, and that meant the threat came from someone close, someone who knew them well enough to strike right where it would hurt. The next morning, he called his two most trustworthy friends, Wesley and Jonah. Both were loyal, honorable, and, above all, smart. If anyone could help him solve this, it was them. "I need your help finding out who set up Eleanor," Garrett said, placing the photos on the diner table where they met. Wesley picked up one of the images, frowning. This was done by a pro. The angle, the distance, everything was planned to make it look like they were together. "This isn't an amateur job. And it wasn't made just to fool anyone," Jonah added, spinning one of the pictures between his fingers. "It was made specifically to fool you, Garrett. By someone who knew exactly how to hurt you." Garrett ran his hands over his face, feeling his anger grow. "That's what I thought. But it makes no sense. Eleanor and I don't have enemies. We're not in conflict with anyone. Who would want to wreck our marriage like this?" They all went quiet for a moment, until Wesley leaned forward. "We start with the basics. Who is this guy? What do we know about him?" Garrett nodded. "His name is Colton. Eleanor said he showed up a few weeks ago and has been following her since. But he doesn't act like a typical stalker. It's like he was waiting for the right moment to make a move, following a plan." Jonah pulled out his phone. "I have a contact who works in private security. He might be able to get something on Colton. Let's see if he has a record." While Jonah sent a message to his contact, Garrett felt they were finally making progress. Until now, they'd only had questions and uncertainty, but now they had a plan to get real answers. An hour later, Jonah got a reply. He looked at his phone, read it silently, then looked up at Garrett and Wesley. "I found something on him. His full name is Colton Hayes. He's got a history of petty scams, nothing major, but enough to be considered dangerous. He was arrested for fraud once but got out on good behavior. And there's one more thing." Jonah paused, as if trying to figure out how to phrase the new information. "He makes money in some questionable ways." Garrett narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" Jonah turned his phone so they could read the screen. "He works as a sort of setup agent. People pay him to seduce husbands or wives, create compromising situations, and provide fake proof of cheating. Basically, he destroys relationships for money." Garrett felt his stomach churn. So that was it. This wasn't some random stalking case. It was a deliberate attempt to destroy his marriage. But who would have hired him? Wesley crossed his arms, thinking. If he does that kind of job, it means someone hired him specifically to go after Eleanor. And that person knew exactly how to plant doubt in your mind. Garrett nodded, fists clenched. "The next step is to find that jerk. I want to know who hired him." Jonah gave a half smile. "I'm already on it. He hangs out at a bar downtown. If we want answers, that's where we start." Garrett looked at his friends and saw their determination. He wasn't alone in this. They finally knew who they were dealing with. All that was left was to find out who was pulling the strings in the background. And once they did, that person would have a lot to explain. The bar was dark, cramped, and smelled like cheap booze mixed with sweat. The kind of place people go to forget their problems, where shady deals happen in quiet corners and nobody asks questions. Garrett, Wesley, and Jonah walked in without drawing attention, exchanging brief glances as they surveyed the crowd. It didn't take long to spot him. Colton was at the back of the bar, leaning against the counter, drinking whiskey like he had no worries at all. He was smiling at a woman next to him but seemed bored, as if he was just passing time. Garrett felt his anger boil up inside. This was the man who tried to destroy his marriage, a guy who made a living off other people's misery. Before Garrett could confront him, Wesley put a steadying hand on his shoulder. Don't cause a scene, he murmured. We get our answers first. Garrett nodded, taking a deep breath to stay calm. They made their way across the bar, weaving through the tables, until Garrett stopped right next to Colton. I hope the money you got was worth it, he said, voice thick with threat. Colton froze for a second, then turned slowly, as if he'd been expecting this. When he saw Garrett, he didn't look scared. In fact, he smiled, a lazy, careless grin. Well, I was wondering when you'd show up. Garrett clenched his fists but kept it together. Cut the act. Who hired you? Colton tilted his head, studying the three men in front of him like he was considering his options. Then he grabbed his glass and took a long sip, dragging out the moment before answering. I'm a businessman, he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. And good business doesn't include betraying my clients. Wesley pulled out a chair and sat down right in front of him, elbows on the table. Let's make this simple. Either you tell us who paid you, or we make sure your business ends tonight. Colton let out a low chuckle, but his gaze changed. He realized he wasn't dealing with guys who were just blowing smoke. He knew that if he didn't cooperate, the consequences could be worse than disappointing a client. He sighed, rolling his glass on the counter. You guys really don't have a clue, do you? Garrett narrowed his eyes. Stop stalling and spit it out. Colton smiled again, but this time, there was something cruel about it. He leaned forward slightly, looking Garrett right in the eyes. It was someone who knows you well. Someone who knew exactly how to hit you where it hurts. Garrett's heart pounded. His chest tightened as Colton said a name that froze his blood. Vivian Moore. For a moment, it felt like the world went silent. Garrett's mind spun as he tried to process what he'd just heard. Vivian? Eleanor's best friend? The woman who was always at their place, giving advice, always around? He didn't want to believe it. But a part of him knew it made sense. She knew their life well, knew where Eleanor went, knew how to influence people around her. And most importantly, she knew exactly how to make Garrett suspicious. Jonah was the first to break the silence. You're lying, he said, voice laced with doubt. Why on earth would Vivian do that? Colton shrugged. I have no idea. But she was very clear about what she wanted. She hired me to get close to Eleanor, make it look like she was seeing me in secret. And she paid very well for it. Garrett felt an almost uncontrollable surge of anger. He thought of grabbing Colton by the collar and demanding more, but it wouldn't help. What needed to be done now was to face the truth. Vivian had betrayed them. Eleanor needed to know. The drive home felt endless. Garrett gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white, his jaw set in anger. Jonah and Wesley, in the back seat, were silent too, trying to process it all. But no one was feeling it more than Garrett. Vivian's name echoed in his head like distant thunder, impossible to ignore. It made no sense and yet, at the same time, everything fit together in a cruel way. Vivian. The woman Eleanor called a sister, the friend who had been there through the hardest times, the confidant. And now, the one behind the effort to destroy everything they'd built. When Garrett walked in the door at home, Eleanor turned to face him immediately. Her face was filled with anxiety and fear. She'd been waiting for answers ever since he left that night, and from the look on his face, she knew he'd found them. Garrett? Her voice wavered. He stopped in the middle of the living room, staring at her with a mix of hurt and outrage. It was Vivian. Eleanor's face twisted in shock. What? Vivian hired Colton to get close to you. She set this all up. The silence that followed was so thick it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Eleanor stood there in disbelief. She blinked a few times, as though her brain refused to accept what she was hearing. No, she spoke in a near whisper. That can't be. Garrett took a deep breath, seeing the pain in his wife's eyes. He knew how much that name meant to her. Vivian wasn't just a friend. She was someone Eleanor trusted wholeheartedly, someone she never imagined would betray her so cruelly. "I wish it were a lie," Garrett said, coming closer. But Colton admitted it. "And it all makes sense, Eleanor. Who else had that kind of access to our lives? Who else would know exactly how to plant the seed of doubt?" Tears welled up in Eleanor's eyes as she shook her head. "I don't understand, why?" Garrett hesitated. That was the hardest question. Nothing could justify such a brutal betrayal. But he knew there was only one way to get that answer. "You need to talk to her." His words sounded heavy, and Eleanor agreed, even though she didn't want to believe it. She had to look Vivian in the eye and hear why she'd done this. She made a quick phone call. Vivian answered like nothing was wrong, but her tone changed when Eleanor asked her to come over. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. Eleanor opened the door slowly. Vivian was standing there, looking like her usual self, perfectly put together, hair in a neat bun, nails flawless, expression calm. But there was something different. Her gaze wasn't the gaze of a friend, it was the gaze of someone who knew they'd been caught. "Eleanor," Vivian forced a smile. "You look so serious. What's going on?" Eleanor held the doorframe to keep herself from shaking. "You know very well what's going on." Vivian's smile faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered. "I have no idea what you're talking about." Garrett appeared behind Eleanor, arms crossed. "Colton spilled it. We know everything." Vivian went pale for a moment, then laughed, a low, bitter laugh, like someone who'd finally put down a heavy burden. "So, you found out," she said, licking her lips before raising her eyes again. "Great." Eleanor felt her stomach turn. "Why, Vivian? I never did anything to you. I always trusted you." Vivian arched an eyebrow, and then her face went cold. "That's the problem, Eleanor. You always trusted too much." She took a step forward, as if she wanted to make sure Eleanor felt the weight of her words. "I spent years by your side, listening to you talk about your perfect marriage, about how wonderful Garrett is. I watched you build this dream life while she laughed again, but this time with pain. While I just stood by." Eleanor swallowed hard. "You were jealous?" "I was filled with hate," Vivian corrected, now showing her true feelings. "You never noticed, did you? Always so naive, so good, thinking everybody around you adored you. But the truth is, Eleanor, I couldn't stand watching you get everything I ever wanted." Garrett clenched his fists. "So you tried to destroy our marriage out of jealousy?" Vivian smiled, but her eyes were full of resentment. "I tried to open your eyes, Garrett. I wanted you to see your wife wasn't as perfect as you thought. But it looks like you were too blind to see it." Eleanor felt her heart break into a million pieces. "I did nothing but love you like a sister, Vivian." "That might have been the biggest problem," Vivian said quietly. "Because I never loved you back that way." Silence filled the air. Eleanor took a deep breath, wiping the tears from her eyes. "I don't know what's worse, that you tried to destroy my life, or that in the end, you destroyed your own." Vivian smiled again, but this time, she looked tired. "Maybe I did." She stepped back, as if saying goodbye. "I guess this is my last visit." No one tried to stop her as she walked out. The silence she left behind was crushing. Eleanor felt a deep ache in her chest, like she'd lost someone forever. And in a way, she had. Garrett pulled her into a tight hug. "She'll never hurt us again." Eleanor closed her eyes, trying to let that truth sink in. Vivian had tried to destroy everything. But in the end, what remained was what had always been there, a marriage strong enough to survive any lie. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.